think it's clear for everybody that we see heat waves and extreme weather events reoccurring of all times, and climate change is not a far away, distant issue anymore, but it's an issue of today. We also have general consensus that this is caused by the burning of the fossil fuels, by the oil, gas, and coal, and that addressing the issue of climate change mitigation needs to be focused on reducing this, if you like, energy hunger, but also by different energy sourcing. And there, of course, it becomes more difficult because there are, interests involved. But it's also this question of, is it something that we think and believe conceivable and possible? Do we think in the future that we can do without the oil, gas, and coal? Well, I think now with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, many countries in this world will also see the higher prices and the other energy crisis, and maybe even rationing. And we see that both for societies, but even for militaries, energy sourcing increasingly is becoming a big issue with the vulnerabilities of the fossil fuel supply chains, and also the electricity grid systems being demonstrated in the Russia-Ukraine war almost on a daily basis. So energy transition clearly is the issue of today, and renewables. And there you see also in terms of geopolitics here at Risina, that the major powers are positioning themselves differently, and India is a crucial country in this regard. And it also sits a bit between, the electrostate China and the petrostate US. And me, being based in the Netherlands at Klingenau Institute, we very much sympathize with this position because we are in a similar boat. We also worry a lot about these dependencies. And I think in the past, Europe has made headways with polluter-pays policies, climate policies. But today, let's say the energy strategic autonomy is also as important for the energy transition and also the economic realities. So with that, I hope that we can dive into this panel debate. I will ask a question to each of the speakers, and maybe a follow-up question if time allows. But we would also very much hope that you can join the debate and intervene with questions that are on your mind, and hear a bit more about the perspective. So the first speaker that I have on my list is Erik Solheim, and we of course know him also because he was the executive director of UNEP for many years, but he is now also very active on the climate policies and energy issues in China and also India. And I always find it very interesting. You are from Norway, which is a country with a lot of oil and gas. For Europe, that's very great because we have at least one country that is on friendly terms with us and a reliable supplier. But it's also strange that a country that has grown so rich on fossil is at the same time also a country where climate change is so high and the domestic energy sourcing is so low carbon already. So that's a remarkable combination. And I wanted to ask you, what are your perspectives on this global situation we find ourselves in and the prospects for mitigation?
Look, I will be very happy to come back to Norway later, but I think that's a sideshow. The main show is China and India. Look, last year, coal consumption fell for the first time in modern history in both China and India. Well, it did fall during COVID, but that, of course, was the exception. Except for that, coal consumption was climbing year by year in all modern times in both China and India. Last year, it did go down, and I'm pretty confident that it will continue to go down. And that's because we now see the massive shift from coal to renewables, and that's not mainly because of diplomacy. It's a matter of scale and price. Going solar is simply the cheapest opportunity everywhere in the world. Adani told me that in the desert of Gujarat, it's cheaper to do solar with battery storage than to do coal. That's what's changing the world now. For the first time in human history, there is a pathway to prosperity, which is renewable. In the past, people were not stupid, but they knew that if they wanted their nation to be prosperous, there was no alternative to coal and to oil and gas. Now that alternative is visible. China last year added 315 gigawatt of solar, 120 gigawatt of wind to the grid. That's in a league for itself. But India's number 2. India added 40 gigawatt last year, more than any other nation except China. India is now the 3rd largest producer of renewable energy in the world, and I'm pretty confident it will soon be the 2nd, passing the United States of America. And let me just take you to one place where this is happening. I mentioned Gujarat, that's one place, but another one is the state of Andhra Pradesh. In a place called Pinnapuram in Andhra Pradesh, Greenco has established the world's largest combined solar, wind, and hydropower as storage facility in the world. There is nothing like that in the United States of America. There's nothing like that in Europe. Only place where there is something you can compare is in China. This is 7 gigawatt, and it works like this. In daytime, where of course Andhra Pradesh is blessed with the sun, they use the sun to pump up the water from a lower to an upper reservoir. They release the water at night, and then of course that 24-hour energy from this one facility. How much is 7 gigawatt? Well, it's, for example, exactly the same size as the entire grid in Sri Lanka, which is a nation of 22 million people. It's the same as the functioning grid in Nigeria, which is the largest nation in Africa. And I can go on comparing. 7 gigawatt of this is absolutely remarkable. There is no river there. There's no waterfall. There's no traditional hydropower. It's just an artificial mechanism where you bring up water and you release water, and you have 24 hours of renewable power. This is absolutely world-changing. And next year, or this year, Greenco will open a new facility in Madhya Pradesh, the year after in Karnataka, then in UP. By 2030, Greenco expects to have 5 such enormous facilities in India, and Adani expects a similar development from Adani. Adani is a much bigger company than Greenco, but both these companies are doing this. And again, there is nothing like this anywhere in the world except China. So Indians, be proud and take confidence that very soon India will be the 2nd largest producer of renewable, and that is the new way to prosperity, to bring Indians up from the poverty into the middle class.
Right, thank you so much. How passionate, and also I think it's great that you're sitting next to the man that was the CEO of the National Institution for Transforming India. So that has also been at the root of these developments. But Amitabh Kant, we also know you as the former G20 Sherpa. I wanted to ask you, this sounds fantastic, but is it still possible to completely abandon in the future coal and gas and oil, or is this just additional energy provision that energy-hungry India needs? Yeah, how do you also see this in relation to the baseload needs for the energy provision? Thank you.
Thanks. So first is that India's done over 265 gigawatt of renewable energy at record prices. We've been through a process of transparent bidding processes. But the important thing of what Eric said is that India has achieved this through the private sector. And the private sector has been able to attract private equity and venture capital funds from across the world in this. Our ambition is to cross more than 500 gigawatts by 2030. And I think my view is that India will reach about 700 gigawatts of renewable energy. And India believes that it should use renewable energy. It is climatically blessed. It should use renewable energy to crack water to produce green hydrogen. The latest bid on green hydrogen has just come out, and that's at about We used to get green hydrogen at about $5 per kilogram. The latest bid in India is $3.8 per kilogram. That's the cheapest recorded price through transparent bidding anywhere in the world. India's ambition is to bring it down to $1 per kilogram by 2030. Our objective is that today we import over about $250 billion worth of fossil fuel. By 2030, and we should be exporting clean energy to the rest of the world. We should become the cheapest producer of green hydrogen. We should be an exporter of green hydrogen in its liquid form, ammonia. We should be a leading manufacturer of electrolyzer. We should use the strength of India in terms of its climatic condition. Our objective is that we should drive down the price of renewable energy. We should drive down the price of battery storage. We should push for more and more of pump hydro, which Eric spoke about. There are more than 30 pump hydro projects presently under operation in India. We should use the size and scale of India to drive down prices. For us, growing sustainable, we do it not at a green premium, but use the size and scale to do it at a green discount. We believe that net zero is net positive, and that's why we procured 500 million LED bulbs and brought their prices down to 20% of their price. We procured in the first round about 7,500 electric buses. This tender is for 10,000 electric buses. The third tender is for 30,000 electric buses in India, pooling the demand of all the state. And the fourth tender will be for 100,000 electric buses. Our aim is that use the size and scale to make India the manufacturer of electric buses, but also become an exporter of electric buses, use size and scale to bring down prices. The challenge in India is not about making renewable cheap anymore. The challenge is about ensuring that there is transmission, there is battery storage, that you're able to look at a systems approach to ensure that we are able to get 24/7 round-the-clock renewable. That is the key challenge for India. And we are now pushing for more and more pump hydro. We are pushing for more and more transmission. We are pushing for more and more battery storage. That is the way forward. And all through private sector enterprise, through free enterprise. We are not a China. China is not a democratic country. We believe in free enterprise. And therefore, we believe that private sector of India will drive this, and we'll be able to attract private capital from the rest of the world in India through a transparent process. But India will emerge as a country which will be net positive and which will do this transmission from fossil fuel, which you had mentioned, to clean energy on a green discount using its size and scale.
Thank you so much. When you were talking about the buses, I had to think about this kill switch of Chinese buses purchased by Norway that risk surfaced about 2 months ago. And I think in that regard also for Europe, it's super attractive if India would become this export market. Also in light of the concerns of the hydrogen costs that you still see surfacing in Europe all the time. In my own country particular, the skepticism on hydrogen is rising, and in Germany too.
If you allow me, since you mentioned Norway, exactly the opposite is the case. We lost a lot because we didn't buy Chinese buses which were fit for winter conditions in Norway. We bought from somewhere else, and they were not fit for winter conditions. So buying from China had been the right thing to do for Norway, not the wrong, which was covered by media.
All right, thanks. With that, I would like to go to the next speaker, Alizé Bournet. You're from the Agence Français de Développement, the French development agency, but you've also been based here and also been based in China before and in other places. And you look at also at these issues from the geopolitical and geoeconomic perspective. So I wanted to ask, how do you look at the prospect for climate mitigation in today's world? And I thought maybe just a specific question to add is also from the French perspective, yeah, how do you view also China and the rest of the world, and should the EU cooperate with China's Belt and Road Initiative investments or be a bit cautious? And what would you advise India in this respect? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe to answer your question, allow me to take a side main road, which is geopolitics. Because of course, when we talk about climate finance now, sustainable cooperation, we can't actually not mention what is happening and the shift, the strategic shift that is happening. And I'm going to go back 10 years ago, actually, when it was 2015. And we all thought at the time that the Paris Agreement and the cooperation at the time was a victory, and kind of we made it. Like the climate cooperation, the sustainable development will not be challenged anymore. And it was something that was shared by the Global North and the Global South. And 10 years, 11 years after, we are such in a different landscape. And I guess that this strategic shift needs to be addressed as well. And it will be exemplified by the question you asked, which is how can we work with China that is for EU both a rival, a systemic rival, and a systemic partner. So when we talk about geopolitics of development, it's actually something that was not really mentioned before because I come from this sector, and when I talk to my colleagues, they say we have nothing to do with geopolitics. It's about finance, it's about engineering, it's about techniques, and it actually comes from a geopolitical background. Because when you go back to 1944, David Maitrani, just to quote one author, said that to bring the peace, to construct the long-term cooperation, you need to go through a technical approach and a functionalist approach. And that's where actually the sector built also its software, its language, and the way to cooperate. And it was actually named universalist approach for a long time, while it was not actually completely universalist, right? It was the 1945 word. It was based also around a Western-centric approach that has been questioned for some reasons that are very valuable. And currently this sector is, of course, challenged within, because it has to be more balanced, it has to be reshaped, also to have more room for new countries, for the BRICS countries, for superpowers, and also to reinvent the middle powers place, such as France, for example. But again, what is the world we're living in? Can you remember the last 6 months when we talked about climate finance on the news? Except during the COP. Actually, it's not something that is brought up based on the geopolitical landscape that we have. And when I talk about geopolitics of development, this is actually to say that there is a strategic shift that we need to take, and we need to say that building cooperation on climate, on sustainable energy, is not a strategic option, it's actually a strategic imperative. And it's an imperative to be a great power. And I think India has taken this shift for a long time, you mentioned it. China also in a different way. EU, of course. But currently we are challenged by new ways of considering this cooperation, by realistic power that will say that interest is better than values, that is better than universalism. And we have to think about it when we are building cooperations. I'm going to end this sideway road by 4 dynamics that I see currently in the geopolitics of development. First is the mutual interest approach based on mutual actors, for example, development banks, and we're building this kind of partnership. You mentioned EU and China. AFD is working with the China Development Bank to implement projects that are with open tenders, with shared values, environmental issues that are universalist in a way, if you allow me to use this term. The second dynamic I see is the imperative of solidarity. That is, for example, fueling the adaptation finance, because we're still struggling to de-risk this sector and to bring private sector investment. But you see that this trend, this dynamic of imperative of solidarity is actually declining. The third one we see is the realpolitik of development. this one is trending. This is actually, I'm gonna help you because you are aligned with my interest, which is completely different from actually what was the 2015 moment, but this is not different from the birth of the development system, because 1945 was actually during the Cold War. And the last one is something that we call the geopolitics of development towards solidarity as both an objective and an interest. And I guess that from what we see today and what we say concretely, this is the way forward. And for that, I will end by saying that we are trying to develop new partnerships. I can go further in the next round or during questions. But this is really important also to add to what you said, to build banks to banks, states to states, and cities to cities to support this movement from the public sector and the private sector.
Right, thank you so much. And I think also this is a very good bridge to another big factor in this space, which is philanthropy. And I'm really happy that we are joined by Seema Paul. She is from the Sequoia Climate Foundation. As you may know, the sequoia is these big trees in California and other places in the earth, which are super resilient. What I think is very nice about philanthropies is that they can really not operate on the basis of economic or national interests, but they can really reach out to what they see is, for the global good. And they can really look after the benefits. But of course, their means are not unlimited. So they also have to prioritize. So Seema, in the work of the Sequoia Climate Foundation, where do you see you can make most impact with mitigation efforts? And are you focusing more on the carbon reduction or on the renewable energy provision, or are you focusing more on the energy systems that are needed for that? Where do you invest most?
I think as a philanthropy, we tend to take a very pragmatic approach based on the geography that we are working in. And in most geographies, I think the opportunity is to press the accelerator on renewable energy, which then obviously requires that you also work on grids and you take a systems approach to enabling the renewable energy to scale up. But because the two gentlemen on my right have spoken so, have been so articulate in expressing the importance of renewable energy, maybe I can speak to something that often gets neglected, but you, Mr. Kant, as the Sherpa of G20, really emphasized, which is energy efficiency. Coming out of that G20 that India led, we had a holy trinity of doubling renewable energy, doubling renewable energy and tripling renewable energy, doubling the pace of energy efficiency, and finding a path to exit fossil fuels. Energy efficiency is the cheapest resource. It's often described as the first resource, but it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And if you look at the latest IEA report on energy efficiency, despite the commitment that the G20 countries made, the pace of energy efficiency has gone down in EU and US to 1%. That's really a very, very low record. And we really need to work further on this globally. India and China, on the other hand, have done relatively well. They've kept the commitment, or by some design, or maybe by happenstance, or maybe a combination of the two. They are both trending towards 3.5 and 4% increase in energy efficiency. So they are nearing the doubling goal, which is not to say that there isn't scope to do much more. There is scope in all economies to do much more. And if we keep pressing the accelerator on renewable energy and we don't press the accelerator on energy efficiency, it almost amounts to being on a treadmill. You're running fast, but you're getting nowhere. There's very little cost involved to energy efficiency. And even in today's geopolitics, we can do wonderfully well on energy efficiency because it's in the self-interest of the countries and it's in the self-interest of the industry to do it. You take, motors. Electric motors consume almost 45% of the energy in the world today. And there are only 5 companies in the world that manufacture this. Is it so hard to crack this nut? Can we not get the five together and, use the power of investors, the power of development banks, and the power of the pension funds, join hands and make sure that in underwriting any loans or making any investments, we will make energy efficiency the first principle. So I think there's a lot to be done on energy efficiency, and I'm really thrilled that in the latest, not the latest, but the first pathway study that India has done on net zero and achieving developed country status, how to take both these goals forward. These reports were released in the last fortnight. They have really prioritized energy efficiency. So I think from a philanthropic standpoint, it's really important that we take a systems lens. We focus on all aspects. We are facing challenges on mineral supply chains. Energy efficiency doesn't require that. We are facing challenges of climate finance. Well, energy efficiency doesn't require that. So why are we not prioritizing it? I think for philanthropies, this ought to be a very important agenda, and at least at Sequoia Climate Foundation, while we are working on renewable energy, we are also very pragmatically trying to press the accelerator on energy efficiency. And I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, and point well made, I would say. A really important contribution. I also feel that that brings us a bit back more to how can we also maybe depoliticize the issue. And Alize, you spoke already very nicely about the Paris Agreement, and that at that point in time there was the belief that it would be possible to cooperate on the mitigation agenda as a global community, if you like. And it was also a very strong signal to the financial world, to the pension funds, to the investors, that maybe, new investments in fossil would become stranded assets. But it was also, a moral agenda, the 1.5 coalition, and so on. So with that, I would like to go to you, Niven Winchester, from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, because you have also looked at this, let's say, more moral perspective of looking at global action for climate change. And New Zealand is also, in a way, a front-runner country that values nature very highly, but is also burning the brunt. So what is your perspective on what you've just heard, and what is still holding the international community back at this point in time?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me for this panel. It's been very encouraging what I've heard, and I've been pleasantly surprised about what's been going on in the private sector. My background is on policy modelling and helping governments examine the impact of various policies, and that's quite a dismal place at the moment. We think of the Paris Agreement. There was a lot of hope there. I think we've even go back further to when I got into this field. In 2009, the US was the largest emitter. They got a bill passed the House that would have reduced their emissions by 83% relative to 2005 levels by 2050. So pretty close to that net zero. And we're just so far away from that world at the moment. So in the policy space, I think it's quite dismal. And even where we are seeing policies being put in place, you mentioned New Zealand, we're at the forefront. Yes, we have an ETS. Yes, we say we care about climate. Yes, we are doing things. But if you go under the hood, there's a lot of window dressing. And the biggest problem I see for within nations who want to tackle climate and have some measures to do that is the collective action problem. And it's widely known in economics, but we have these very large producers, a lot of times the energy producers. In New Zealand, for example, we have cement industry as one firm. So they're very well organised to lobby for that industry's best interest. And even in the EU, we look to lead in this space. We're seeing the watering down of measures, and we're seeing the influence of the lobbying by those big firms that are shaping the policies, and they're watering down targets. In some cases, they're turning them into subsidy scheme for themselves. So we look at the output-based allocation. If I look at the New Zealand ETS, acts as implicit subsidy to producers of energy-intensive manufacturing, and the way it was framed, they were actually better off under this scheme than not having the ETS without the carbon price. So they're hugely powerful. So I was quite depressed in this policy space, but I'm quite encouraged by the ability of society to solve problems given the right incentives, and maybe we don't need the policymakers. We've got private enterprise is solving the problem. I think they'll do it a lot quicker if they had the right incentives in place. If we don't get them in place, it's going to take a little bit longer, but we're seeing it happening, and I've been quite encouraged by being part of this panel. But you know, if there's one thing I could change, it would be to try and break up that collective action problems of big firms having such a large impact on policies.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for pointing out these vested interests that are at stake. And it also made me wonder, we didn't talk much yet about the US, but in what way, let's say, the attack on woke climate change policy is more about different interests, and also a vested interest, and well, the agricultural vested interest I also recognize very much in Europe, and also in my own country, the Netherlands. And that's also holding us back, perhaps. I wanted just to check quickly with the panel if there is things you would like to react to that others have said, and otherwise we will go to the room to see if there's questions from the room. Is there something you want to respond to, what others have raised? Issues? No? Okay, then we go to the room. I see a question over there. Any other hands up? And a question over there. Let's take two questions, please. Please introduce yourself and pose a question, not a statement.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm Rahul. I'm the managing director at Rice House. We are a think tank, not a dialogue. We specialize in foreign policy planning. I will pose my question to Elise. Elise, both Eric, Mr. Kant, most of the panel had focused on how we can cooperate. You focused on the geopolitics of development, especially how Europe can cooperate with China. I would like to ask you the question, how can Europe, especially France, cooperate with India, especially when both of us have a triangular aspect in the Pacifics, and we see the geopolitics playing out in the region, with China moving into Pacific Island nations as development partners, but then start influencing their domestic politics, their foreign policy. How do you address this? How can India and France work together? Because we have talked a lot, but we have not done much in the recent years. How can we do that? Thank you.
Wow, great question. Thank you. And I think also well suited for you. Please. Microphone over here.
Hello, I'm Abhijit. I'm a student at Kautilya School of Public Policy. My question is on similar lines with regards to realpolitik only into LSA only. So it has been highlighted that cities could drive the GDP growth of countries like India, particularly with 35-40% coming from cities itself. So do you think a city-to-city level collaboration could help break through the trap of realpolitik and maybe move towards a more collaborative approach at large?
Yeah, the local connections, is that an option for the future? So there was one question specifically addressed to you, Alizé, but maybe for the other questions on the cities, other panelists would like to answer? Yeah, okay. First Alizé, and then I go to Ambassador Kant. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. It allows me to actually go concretely into what we do. So I had the chance to be posted here for 3 years, and I actually implemented the Indo-Pacific agenda between France and India. Diplomatically speaking, we have a strategic partnership that is actually very important for both countries. It has, in the diplomatic language, a very high level of importance. And as you said, Indo-Pacific is actually a broad concept. At AFD, we do believe it's actually a useful concept for sustainable development, because if you look at the perimeter, the geographic perimeter, it has all the hotspots for protection of the biodiversity, it has all the GDP growth, it has all the population and demographic stakes. So of course it's important for us. We actually developed with ORF, that of course a great partnership that we had, the sustainable finance in the Indo-Pacific. We cooperated with the Exim Bank of India on that. And also we created several think tank networks to help advocating for this sustainable development agenda in the Indo-Pacific. Because to be honest, again, when you talk about Indo-Pacific, it's more about strategic and security stakes. I'm not saying it's not that, but it has also an answer if you just target the sustainable development. So we also developed a project to protect biodiversity and forestry. And for that, we did study tour and the creation of a fund between India, France, and Tanzania. So to answer concretely, this is very important for us. And this is a concrete example where we can actually connect the dots between local and national perspectives.
All right, thank you. Ambassador Kant, would you like to, and Erik Solheim too? Yeah.
So, that question about city-to-city partnership is a very important one because India is a very large country. It's bigger than 24 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 square kilometers. Just to give you a perspective, if Uttar Pradesh was to be a country rather than a state, it would be the 6th largest country in the world on the basis of its population. And the challenge is to learn from the best practices across the world. There's certain things happening on renewable here. As Erik said, there's some unique things happening on pump storage and green hydrogen in India, but there's a lot happening in electric mobility in Norway. There's a lot happening on circularity in Europe. There's huge amount of learning experience which India has to learn in terms of good municipal governance to bring in circular economy, better waste management, etc. And if India's ambition is to become a net positive country by 2070, it needs to technologically leapfrog. And we need to use cutting edge technologies in solar, in wind, in battery storage, in a range of circular sectors, and actually decarbonize sectors after sectors after sectors, starting from steel, cement, fertilizer, all this. And this is a learning process from the best practices across the world. My view is that not merely the country, but states of India need to drive it. Cities need to get into partnership with different cities across the world. There's no reason why India should not go completely 100% electric on two-wheelers and three-wheelers. India gets driven by two-wheelers and three-wheelers. 70% of the carbon emission comes from two-wheelers, three-wheelers in the transport sector. My view is that by 2030, India should go 100% electric on two-wheelers, three-wheelers. We should actually, a public transportation system should completely be driven by electric buses. And therefore, there's a huge learning which India must do from many parts of the world, many cities. There's a lot to learn from places like Curitiba, etc., where electric buses, there's a bus transportation available to every citizen within 1.5 to 2 minutes of last mile connectivity is critical. And therefore, my view is that we are in a process where we need to technologically leapfrog. We are in a process where we must learn the art of structuring projects. We are in the process of where we must be able to work with civil society organizations. We are in the process where we must be able to attract private capital. And that would require a huge learning experience from across the world.
Thank you so much. If I may, maybe for later on, what do you say to critics who still say, yeah, but there are still sectors where it's not possible? And I'm also thinking, for instance, about defense. That's a rapidly growing sector where also the fossil dependencies are still quite high. So what do you say to those who say, yeah, but we still need coal, or we still need something for the base load because the wind is not always blowing and the sun is not always shining? And with the hydrogen, we can maybe store some, but it also comes at a loss of energy.
So I spoke about the systems approach and the need for strengthening transmission and battery and pump storage in the morning. But one of the key things to my mind is that India has opened up the small modular reactor sector, the nuclear sector, with a lot of deliberation for private sector. And India's opened up the nuclear sector for private sector, and particularly the small modular reactor. And therefore, in the future, we should, and it's been done with after a lot of careful thought and deliberation, that sector should really provide the baseload energy, plus pump storage and battery storage and better transmission. It's not that India could ramp up renewable in a much bigger way. India would do that with private sector play. But it's not about ramping up generation. It's about your ability to transmit renewable from places like Gujarat and Rajasthan to the grid, and therefore you need better transmission, you need more battery storage, you need more pump storage. All that is critical, and that would require you to really look at a systems approach. But small modular reactor will be critical.
Thank you. Okay, Erik Solheim, and then I saw 2 questions here from the room. Please, Erik. Yeah.
There is, of course, no way where you improve your energy security more than if you go into solar and wind. I mean, the sun is Indian, the wind is Indian, the rivers are Indian, while the oil and gas comes from Russia or Saudi Arabia, maybe even from our nation, Norway. Whenever India import a barrel of oil, is vulnerable to outside pressure and closing of the Hormuz Strait, or whatever happens at the international arena. And it's a money sent to somewhere else, to Moscow or Riyadh or Oslo. While everything is renewable, you save the money here, which you can use for schools, hospitals, whatever, and you make yourself more energy independent. So this is the number 1 issue if you want to go energy secure. Yeah, base it on renewables. That's also, by the way, what's happening in Europe now when we wanted to get off our dependence on Russia. We have gone into a lot more renewables. And also China is doing this for many reasons, but a main reason why China is going solar that fast is they want to be more independent of the United States of America. Then your question about cities. Obviously, the number 1 factor in India is the policies of Narendra Modi, the top policies in India. That is defining everything. Those policies go wrong, it will be very difficult. Fortunately, Narendra Modi, I speak at many conferences where he is the main speaker, and I'm one of the other speakers, so I listen to him. Modi speaks about the environment all the time. And in my view, he speaks about the environment in a much better way, than our European leaders, because he sets out environment and climate as an opportunity rather than a problem. But still, there is scope for cities to act. Indoor, the cleanest city in India, have you been there? Have you seen how clean it's indoor? There's not a paper in the street, nothing. And all the wet waste is used to fuel the city buses with renewable energy into the buses. If indoor can do it, because of good policies in that city, why can't others do it? Go to Hyderabad. There is now about 200 urban parks and forests in the city of Hyderabad. And Hyderabad got international recognition as a green city, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, because of its enormous efforts. Well, if Hyderabad can do parks, because other cities can do parks. If indoor can be clean, because other cities can be clean. And then finally, your question about China. Look, 10 years ago, China was probably the most polluted place in the world. Now all the Chinese cities are absolutely clean. All the rivers and waterways in China is also all clean. Go to the Zhejiang province just south of Shanghai. The rivers and waterways in the past, they were nicknamed soya sauce rivers because they were black and brown like soya sauce. Now you can lay down and drink from it. You can let your 2-year-old child drink from these rivers because they're absolutely clean. This has happened in 10 years in China. Very recently, China had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800s on the measurement of pollution in Beijing or Shanghai and all the big cities. Well, on this PM 2.5. Last year, on average in Beijing, was 27. If China can do this, of course, India can do exactly the same. How clean it would be in India or in Delhi next October if India did some of the same policies as China. And any nation who want to go green now depend on a partnership with China. I've been to a huge number of Indian businesses doing green stuff. Tamil Nadu, making battery packs. Yes, wonderful, creating jobs in Tamil Nadu, but the battery cells are coming from China. Right. Solar panels made in India, yes, but the batteries, solar cells are coming from China. Of course, the next step for China, for India, is to do all this by itself, obviously, to create the entire value chain for solar panels, for batteries, for electric cars, for electric scooters, all this right here in India. But at this stage, that's most easily done if you work with Chinese technology providers and learn from them, and then do better. By the way, every scooter in every Chinese city is now electric. Every scooter. There's no motorbikes run on fossil fuels in any Chinese city.
I think there's still some issues with refinery and the pollution of the critical raw materials. But we should go to the room for more questions. There is a question over there, and there is a question over there. Yeah, please. Question over there. Oh, you can also go first, and then we go to her. Oh.
She had the original mic, but anyway.
Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
My name is Anna Tunkel. I run an advisory firm called Sustainable Impact, and I work with consequential entrepreneurs in helping scale predominantly clean energy technologies. And so my question actually is for Ambassador Kant, and it was such a pleasure to collaborate with you on the G20, and your leadership has been exemplary. And also to Minister Solheim, more on the topic of national competitiveness. So again, just to set the context, the types of companies that I advise focus on clean energy solutions. So from fusion energy, bringing the energy of the sun to Earth, to clean steel, green cement, clean hydrogen, geothermal. And so for many of these first-of-a-kind solutions, what they need is large market stability, demand. Ambassador Kant, you spoke about, I guess, growth without carbonizing, right? And you getting to $1 per kilogram of hydrogen. I guess, what does India need to do to create more of an enabling environment for many of these innovative solutions, be it from policy certainty to creating more of a a level playing field with partnerships with some of the Indian national champions that are looking to create more sustainable demand and clean growth? So, and also from your perspective, Minister, what can national competitiveness strategies be like for Norway to attract some of these technologies?
So how can the industrial policies really make it happen? Huh? That's also a big challenge in Europe that we're confronted with. Please, the question over there. Oh, the question over there. And then we can take a third question. It's fine. And then we go back to the panel. Yeah, please.
Kia ora, Niven. Nice to see a Kiwi in India. My name is Izzy Fennick, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Zealand Climate Foundation. It was nice to hear you acknowledging some of the policy rollbacks that we've had in New Zealand, because I think that would shock a lot of our global peers. We've often been seen as sort of world leading in some of these spaces. And I guess I'm really interested, you know, we seem to have well established the opportunities with renewables and the economic costs and benefits of doing some of these things, and yet we're still making bad policy choices. From your perspective and in the modelling that you've done in this space, how can we better articulate the economic benefits of better policy choices?
Thank you. I was also reminded of the LNG terminals that we rapidly built in Europe. The question over there, as an example of bad policy choices.
Good afternoon. My name is Rahul. I'm not associated with any think tank or with any policy group. I'm a layman, and I'm very enthusiastic about the subject, and I'm starting to pick up a few things here. It just seems to me, and I think Mr. Kant made a reference, I was happy to see the reference to numbers and cost efficiencies and reduction of costs associated with the renewables. And that's good to see, because at the end of the day, it just seems to me that there are two compelling reasons why nations of this world would champion and pursue this agenda. One would be
Please, also a question, eh?
Yes.
Statements.
One would be a compelling business case. The other would be a compelling existential case. I think Europe is in the existential frame of mind, along with a business kind of a thought. The challenge in my mind is trying to understand the implication of the United States having walked away from its sponsorship of the Paris Accord. And not only that, their strident advocacy in favor of fossil fuels and thermals. So they're actually going the other way in a very radical way. How does that impact the global agenda? The second aspect is a lot of the money that we're talking about actually comes from the United States.
Yeah, okay, so the position of the US, can we do this without the US, the big hegemon in this world? All right. I first go to Niven to answer the question of your compatriot, because we haven't heard from you, and then I will go to the other panelists to answer all the other questions.
There's no easy answer to this collective action problem, because there's a whole lot of individuals that you have to try and motivate and organise. But I think the first step would be just getting the information out there. You know, when you unpick, you know, what is a lot of window dressing, and New Zealand's not the only country to do this, it's not very nice what you see in there. So I think getting a plain and simple messaging out there and saying, hey, this is what we say we're doing, but this is what we're actually doing.
I think it's for all the countries. I mean, even in the Netherlands, you know, a small village needs to be bought out because of energy infrastructure requirements. And it's so difficult, you know, all the protests, all the issues around it. And of course, it's also hard if you have to give up your house. But if you get 150% of the value, then you can relocate. And sometimes these bigger offers are necessary. But with the permits given to the LNG terminals, it was very quick, but this is very difficult, you know? So it's these kinds of issues that keep popping up in this space. All right, Erik, please. Erik Solheim.
Just 2 comments. I believe Europe has a lot to learn from the way Prime Minister Modi is framing environment issues. I mean, every European leader should have big ears and listen to him. European leaders nearly always frame climate as a negative issue. Avoiding emissions, we are on the verge to catastrophe, we need to act, laying out all the negatives coming from climate, and even sometimes telling people, oh, there will be a lot of pain going into the environment, but we need to come across that pain. That message don't sell, very, very frankly. Message of Prime Minister Modi is very different. He's hardly ever speaking about emissions. He hardly ever speaks about global climate talks. He speaks about one issue, how 1.4 billion Indians can get out of poverty, creating a large middle class, and how India can shine on the international arena by combining ecology and economy. Going green is going prosperous. That's his constant message. It's a positive message, and it's a much more efficient message. And you can also see how efficient it is. India doesn't have any climate deniers. Where is the Bollywood star? Where is the cricket star who deny climate? Where is the opposition politician who attack Prime Minister Modi on climate or environment? I've been working very closely with Chief Minister Stalin in Tamil Nadu. He's, to say at least, not a good friend of Prime Minister Modi. But he never attacks Modi on economics or environment, but on culture issue, center versus the state, and many other issues. And when you have this strong leadership with a positive message, and avoid all these complications with making environment a culture issue, which we struggle with in Europe, India is much, much more efficient at this stage than we are in Europe. Mm-hmm. Then the United States. Just forget it. Look, I mean, the vast majority of Americans believe climate change is real and want to act. Most politicians in many states do believe the same. Most businesses believe they need to act and have not flip-flopped too much. So this is the policies of Trump in a certain epoch. It will make the United States of America poorer. It will be a massive industrial setback for the United States. Look, do Ford and General Motors believe that the future of the car is fossil fuels? No. The leadership of Ford is absolutely clear. They say the future of the car is electric. But they can't go electric at this stage because there are difficulties with the president. Well, it will just open an absolute market for electric cars to China, but also to Korea. If India can get serious competition, it will open it up for India. Who are the losers? Well, those who gasoline cars for the small American market in the United States. The Chinese market is now much bigger than the American market, and added every other market want electric cars. So this is a losing proposition, and the big losers are exactly the people that Trump say he want to help, the working class of the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. I see that we are already officially 5 minutes over time, so I would like to ask all the other panelists still to say the final words. First we go to you, Alizé, and then we go to Ambassador Kant. Yeah.
Quickly, I agree with you on the fact that the US can be forgotten at some levels. Of course, businesses are still fueling climate finance and energy sector, for sure. Cities are still advocating for the climate policies. And the Democrats said, well, let's wait for November. If this election happen and if they win, they will do a shift. But this being said, we have to acknowledge that actually the US shift is a wave that is hitting us very hard. And I'm taking actually what happened in the MDBs currently, the multilateral development banks. The World Bank is not talking about climate anymore. I was at the annual assembly in October. They were talking about jobs. They were talking about growth. The word climate was nowhere to be found. So this is a structural shift. And actually, as a European and as a bilateral development bank, it's giving me the chills. It's still used under the resilience term. That's how we manage to still work around climate with those actors that have to compile with so many different perspectives. So of course, there is still about climate, but this is a shift. And I will stop here to leave my other panelists, of course, give the final word. But USAID was not dedicated to sustainability. Of course, it was more humanitarian and all. It was 45 billion a year. You have no country nowadays that can actually substitute those grants after the dismantling. China is like 29 billion per year, and it's all the loans, all the economic cooperation. It is not the grants. So this is something we need to acknowledge as well, yes.
Thank you. Thank you also for pointing that out. Ambassador Kant.
So my view is that America is the biggest emitter in the world. Our CO2 emission is 1/10 that of United States. Irrespective of that, I think the present geopolitical scenario is a huge opportunity for emerging markets like India. We do 220 billion worth of fossil fuel imports. We should use this opportunity to really push for clean energy at this point of time. Secondly, our entire emphasis is on ensuring that we make solar much cheaper than fossil fuel. Why the shift in India is taking place is because we've been able to radically bring down prices of solar energy. We are determined to bring down the price of battery storage. We are determined to bring down the price of pump hydro storage. And we are determined to make green hydrogen cheaper than the rest of the world. And we are determined that by 2047, when we are 100, we will be an exporter of clean energy to the rest of the world. The second challenge before the world is that artificial intelligence will be the biggest consumer of fossil fuel energy across the European and the Western part of the world. In India, where we are putting up a huge amount of data centers, we are linking them up with clean energy. We are linking them up with nuclear small modular reactors. We are determined to see that actually AI should be a driver, a force of good for transforming human lives and be driven entirely by clean energy in the future.
Thank you. And also thank you for bringing in AI and the digital elements, because that was still missing in the debate. Thank you so much. Seema.
So 2 quick comments on geopolitics broadly. I think the geopolitics have never been easy for climate change. So it's not that this climate community has not struggled its way through the problems. We've come so far and we can go further. I think we just have to keep calm and carry on wherever we are. And I think there are ways to keep this agenda moving. I highlighted, and I think this panel across the board has highlighted the opportunity with the private sector. So I'd leave with a positive outlook on the geopolitics, that we can do it in spite of geopolitics. Yes, speed is an issue, but speed can come from private action. On the cities and states part, I agree with my fellow panelists that that's a very important opportunity. I want to point out a structural challenge that we have. We don't have platforms that can support city to city and state to state action and partnerships. So I think there is a C40 on the cities front. I don't think that it has really injected speed. It is an effort. I'm positive about it, but I also feel it has not injected speed in city to city learnings happening. I was in Bhubaneswar recently, and somebody told me this is a planned city. It took its example from Chandigarh. If there's only one city in India that learned from another city about how to do city planning, then that's not a great commentary. If there's one Indore, that's not a great commentary. We have to solve this problem structurally. And same is the case for state to state. You know, there is no subnational initiative to drive subnational action and learning of and transfusion of best practices. It's left, the states are left to their own devices, and it happens at a very slow speed. So again, I think there's a structural problem globally, and I don't think we should start thinking about how to solve it globally. If we haven't been able to solve it in India, the 29 states, like what are we talking about solving it globally through subnational action? So I think we have to find structural solutions for these problems. That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. I just wanted to ask Naivan, is there something you still want to say? Because you already said that you were quite positive about what has been said in this panel. And I know when we were preparing, you were, you know, quite concerned about the pace of climate action in this world. Has this helped a little bit to brighten up the mind? And I also wanted to ask for the audience, or are you still saying, well, it all sounds very nice, but I still see also some hurdles?
I guess to leave on a policy note, if we go back to the Doha Development Agenda for multilateral trade negotiations, they were painfully slow and they didn't end up as good as they could have been. But they kept going, and there was a bicycle theory of negotiations there. Was just, let's just keep moving, because if we stop, we're going to fall over. So we're in a very tough spot at the moment with everything going on globally, but as long as we keep moving, we'll get something, and maybe don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. As economists, we're always good at pointing out what is the most efficient outcome, which we're never going to get for anything anyway. But go back to the positive note is a little bit dismal on the policy side at the moment, but private sector, people responding to incentives and opportunities out there, I think that's what has got us to where we are now and will get us hopefully out of this mess as well.
Drive us forward. All right, with that, I would like to ask the audience to give a big round of applause for the panel. Thank you for staying with us and for this insightful panel. And